Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates for the Department of Education and Early Childhood Learning. Questioning for this department will proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Great to be back today in Education and Early Childhood Learning estimates. Following up on some of the conversations where we left off yesterday, in question period today, the Minister was asked about why they're not proceeding with the P3 model of building schools, and I believe her quote was that they were instead going to build schools the right way. So can the Minister clarify that she believes that capital projects in this province should not be built in the P3 model, and that is what is meant by building schools the right way?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. So building on my comments made today in question period, when we're talking about the right way to build schools, that's in a fiscally responsible way. The PC plan that they announced, and as we discussed yesterday in committee, was not properly budgeted for or planned for. Had it gone forward, it would have been an unreasonable and an unrealistic and an unsustainable draw on the public treasury. In the Free Press just this morning, the critic was quoted as admitting that money was not set aside for their plan. He said that we should have gone to Treasury Board with their plan, their announced, unbudgeted for, unrealistic, unreasonable plan. But that wouldn't have been the responsible thing to do. And that's because, well, there's a few reasons, but one of them was certainly because our government was left with a nearly $2 billion deficit after an election year in which the outgoing government ballooned budgets in an irresponsible way. You don't have to take my word for it. The independently hired firm of MNP, that was their findings. They were spending in a risky way, putting Manitobans at risk. The opposition PCs themselves rejected the P3 model back in 2018 as a way of building schools. And that was after they claimed to have studied it. It wasn't just an opinion. They said that they studied the issue and that it would not save money. That the traditional way of building schools would save money, not the P3 model. That was their position in 2018. All of a sudden in 2023, in an election year, they flip-flopped. We believe, the NDP government believes, that wherever possible, where public funds are being spent, we should turn that into public assets. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about the right way. The P3 model, when it comes to schools, has a very suspicious record. We can look to other jurisdictions. We can look to Nova Scotia, where the P3 model was used and subsequently researched and studied, and was proven to have cost the taxpayers in Nova Scotia unnecessary millions of dollars. The P3 model is documented to have failed in Saskatchewan. Even Alberta has rejected the P3 model for school builds. We believe that wherever possible, public schools should be owned by the people of Manitoba. The public should own and benefit from these facilities. Using this model, we have and will continue to make progress. We are currently building 4 new schools, 2 in Sage Creek for DSFM and LRSD, 1 in Seven Oaks, 1 in Steinbach for the Hanover School Division. We are making progress on the school capital plan. The opposition's plan, I would argue, was reckless, was not fiscally responsible, it wasn't real, really. It wasn't real. We have a plan, we are gonna follow it, so every Manitoban in this province can and will succeed.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so just to clarify the minister's comments, because there are a couple of questionable comments there, where she said wherever possible, public funds should turn, that are funding construction should turn into public assets. She does know that how a P3 works is that the facility does turn into a public asset after a certain period of time. I hope she knows that. But my question is, she put a lot of emphasis on that the public should own these facilities when they're public funds being used to develop them. So that's her plan for schools, but she, as a member of cabinet, has approved P3s for affordable housing projects and the Portage Place medical development in the last 3 weeks alone. So schools need to be publicly owned if they're publicly funded, but those 2 developments for affordable housing units and medical facilities don't?
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. We're here to talk about school capital. So while I appreciate the question, I'm not going to comment about decisions being made on other projects. Manitobans elected an NDP government after years of chaos under Brian Pallister's Progressive Conservatives and then Heather Stephenson's Progressive Conservatives. They failed students and families and communities year after year after year. They repeatedly cut operational funding to schools. The funding that went to schools failed to match inflation, which was a cut. And in fact, they capped funding arbitrarily under threat of having administrative funds withheld. The member opposite, in discussing his opinions about our government's capital plan to build schools, which we are making progress on, which we will continue to make progress on, has often referenced the fact that their government built 14 schools in 7 years. And if we average that out, that's 2 schools a year. And then suddenly, in 2023, that previous government announced a plan to build and fund 9 schools instantly because of the model that they chose. And it was a dream. It gave false hope to families and communities, false hope that continues to rear its ugly head today, with communities coming to us talking about these schools, these imaginary schools that were promised. This is reckless governing. That is not what serves the interests of Manitobans. What Manitobans are going to get from our government are realistic, fiscally responsible, properly budgeted plans to improve school capital. And we're going to do that on a case-by-case basis in the best way possible. But we're going to do it realistically. We've got a significant challenge ahead of us. The opposition likes to point out that classrooms are full. And that's true in many cases, not in all cases, but in some cases. What they fail to remember is that it was them that eliminated the legislative requirement to limit class sizes. What they failed to acknowledge was the historic truancy that's going on in the education system for many years, certainly exacerbated by the pandemic, but there was no response. Something they could have done, something we're very proud to have done, was introduce something like the school nutrition program, a historic investment, $30 million towards feeding hungry kids, towards helping staff up food programs, to help buy equipment and resources needed in schools to make sure that they are meeting the students' needs. We're very proud of that program. we can't wait to see the dividends that it pays for years to come.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Well, thank you, Honorable Chair. And once again, there's a bit of revisionist history going on here. If the minister would like to know, it was actually a commitment to build 10 new schools by 2029, 20 new schools by 2029 was the original commitment in the 2019 election campaign. And with the addition of the 9 schools from the P3, it would have taken us to 23 new schools by 2029. That was the overall commitment. It was not that the commitment was to have these 9 new schools spring out of a hole in the ground, as she is characterizing it on the record today, but I digress. The minister, I have to switch gears here to childcare. And the minister last week was asked, how many childcare projects in the first year of this NDP government have been approved? New childcare projects have been approved in the first year in office. And she is quoted in Hansard as having said, I'm pleased to update the House that over 120 projects have been approved and will be out throughout every region of Manitoba. Can the minister table a list of those 120 projects today?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Thank you for the question about the childcare situation here in Manitoba, which I'm excited to talk about as a parent of school-age children, and recently the parent of preschool-age children. I myself have had a lot of lived experience in navigating this system, which had been woefully neglected under the previous government. So we can certainly table a list of previously announced projects. However, there are a host of projects which are approved, however, cannot yet be announced because of the terms of the agreement with Canada. That announcement should be coming in a matter of weeks, and we would be happy to share that information when it's available. And we're very excited about the work that the department has been doing, the work that our government has been doing to create more childcare spaces here in Manitoba that are sorely needed. The goal, obviously, is to meet 23,000 new childcare spaces for children 6 and under. We are well on our way towards that goal. There's much work yet to do, but we are rolling up our sleeves and doing that work. But we all know in this room that there are other challenges facing the childcare sector that can't be solved by simply immediately adding a bunch of spaces. This has to be done in a targeted and measured way, and that's because of the challenges that Manitoba has experienced under the last 7.5 years under the previous government in recruiting and retaining early childhood educators. So we would love to open all those 23,000 spaces tomorrow, but the reality is that we would not have the ECE, early childhood educator staff, to fill those positions and provide that much needed care. So as part of our most recent budget, Budget 2024, we increased operating grants to childcare facilities by 5%. And that's after 7 years of freezes to those operating grants, which leaves facilities in a lurch. Childcare facilities require funds to operate. Again, as I said previously, we could open up, I wish we could open up 23,000 childcare spaces tomorrow, but without the operating funds to run those facilities, the spaces are somewhat less valuable. We know that we need staff to open more space. So that's why, on top of increasing the operating grants to childcare facilities by 5%, we have also increased wages for ECEs by 2.75%. And we believe that that will help recruit and retain more workers in the sector. I know that parents in this room will agree, ECEs are one of the most valuable jobs in our community. They care for our children, our youngest, most vulnerable citizens, and for too long they've been undervalued and underpaid. So with our 2.75% increase, we're changing direction. We've also maintained the tuition reimbursement program for students in ECE training programs, and we know that will help also. I'm also proud of the work of the Minister of Advanced Education, who has expanded post-secondary programs and established 2 new programs at the University College of the North and Université du Saint-Boniface. So a lot more work to do, but we're rolling up our sleeves and we're getting it done.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm glad to hear the minister is maintaining the tuition rebate that was in place under the previous government. That's good to know. She supports that progressive conservative measure. It's also good to know that she supports the wage grid, which was part of this initial agreement, which was signed on by progressive conservatives. I'm glad to know that she supports that progressive conservative initiative as well. The minister's justification for why they've only announced 1 childcare center, which is in the Premier's constituency, I might add, this year, 1 year in office, is because the federal government hasn't agreed to make the announcements yet. Not sure if anybody's read the federal polling lately, but I'm pretty sure the federal Liberals are looking for some good news. So does the minister honestly expect Manitobans to believe that the reason these projects haven't been announced is because Justin Trudeau and his team can't get around to it?
The Honourable Minister.
I'm happy to talk about the partnership between Canada and Manitoba. And thank goodness that Manitobans had the good sense of electing a new democratic government who's willing to work across jurisdiction, across party lines. We're here, our government is here to serve the best interests of Manitobans. Previous government had, and frankly continues to have, a reputation of an inability to work with any level of government, to work with stakeholders, to work with public servants. That's something that I heard a lot about on the doorstep during the election campaign, was the fact that Manitobans just want elected representatives that are there to work for them. Doesn't always have to be a game of politics. And I know why, or I can suspect why the member opposite is bringing up the next federal election, because I know they're watching it very closely. They're frankly obsessed with it. Obsessed with Pierre Poilievre. In fact, much of this first year in government, during this first year of government, while on our side of the house, we've been working for Manitobans, rolling up our sleeves, the other side of the house talks constantly about their federal leader, talks constantly about federal policies, federal programs. They had a dismal reputation for being able to deal with municipalities in our province. I was just at an event this week hearing from a municipal leader who couldn't say enough good things about the collaborative relationship that our government has. And this was a municipality that doesn't really have a reputation for necessarily supporting the NDP, but this municipal leader was thrilled with our style of government. And whether it's Justin Trudeau or Pierre Poilievre or any other federal leader, our premier has shown a willingness to work with all levels of government, across party lines, to do what's best for Manitobans. And we're having a lot of great success. The member, I believe, referenced that there's been one daycare open, or one space open. I apologize, I can't recollect his exact words in the question. But the truth of the matter is that 2,100 new childcare spaces have been opened since the NDP were elected. As I mentioned before, while I'm not able to table the list of new capital projects at this point, over 120 capital projects have been approved and will be built throughout every region of Manitoba. 33 have been completed, 20 are in construction, and 75 are in the design and planning phase. So I think that's really good work. I welcome the collaboration with the federal government, a federal government who has shown some leadership on the childcare file. We hope that whatever government is formed after the next federal election will share those priorities. But again, we're happy to work with the Prime Minister, mayors, Reeves, right across this province, regardless of political stripe. We are a listening government, and we really mean that. That is not just rhetoric. We put that into action every single day.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Well, thank you, Honorable Chair. And, you know, the minister has a lot of contradictions in all of her commentary so far today and yesterday. The latest of which is that, on the one hand, she's talking about spending, or rather not spending money from a bilateral agreement that was signed between our government, our previous government, and the federal government, and then saying, on the other hand, that we never worked with the federal government at all. But the reality is this money wouldn't be in her budget to spend if Progressive Conservatives hadn't signed on to this agreement with the federal Liberals and made this happen. And so the minister, it's unfortunate that she wants to stonewall and make excuses for why she hasn't announced any of these projects, why her government hasn't announced any of these projects. There are many centers, and I've written to the Minister of Education on behalf of many centers in my constituency and in my colleagues' constituencies and in some of their constituencies across the province, advocating on their behalf, because I know there are countless centers who are waiting to hear from this government on their expansions. And so I question the minister's commitment to reaching out to the federal government, and they might have a rosy relationship and they all like to have coffee together, but are they actually getting anything done? And I would argue that if they haven't announced any new childcare centers over the last year, they're not getting very much done. And so the question to the minister is, when is her next outreach to the federal minister going to take place? And when will they schedule the announcement of these approved childcare centers?
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, I'm very proud of our rosy relationship with the federal government. And I wish that the opposition would aspire to have those same types of rosy relationships. Because at the end of the day, what that rosy relationship produces is real results for Manitobans. We could pick partisan fights all day long, like the previous government did, but we'd be in the same position as them, which is outside of government, which hopefully they will stay for a long, long time. To answer the question directly, I will very shortly have my first meeting with the federal minister, perhaps as early as tomorrow. We'll see. Stay tuned. And I'm also very excited to have just learned that the federal ministerial FPT for education is happening in PEI in November. So heaven forbidding, we all, as we mentioned yesterday, we all wish the minister, the MLA for Transcona well, and that he will be back in this chair sooner than later, healthy and well. But should he still be on his health journey, I will be happy to represent Manitoba at that table and advance the interests of Manitobans at that table. Rosy relationships produce real results. We've seen many examples of that across government since we were elected back in October of 2023. An example of what that can produce is that earlier this year, our government signed a 4-year infrastructure funding agreement, which will provide over $20.9 million in the first 3 years to further support the creation of new childcare spaces in underserved communities, including Indigenous and Francophone communities across the province. Those are real results. That's what Manitobans are looking for. Manitobans aren't interested in the political bickering. Manitobans want to elect folks that want to serve them, that want to work in the public interest. And those are our values. Those are NDP, New Democratic values, is serving the public. And we recognize, again, we are on this side of the house, we're humble enough to admit that things are tough when it comes to childcare. I've had that experience myself. My kids are now all school-aged, but during the tenure of the previous PC government, my children were preschool-aged, and it was a struggle, not just for my family, but families all over my community to access quality and affordable childcare. That's why Manitobans elected an NDP government. We're a government that understands everyday Manitobans, that is here to work for everyday Manitobans every single day in the public interest. We're a government that believes in supporting families, that believes in supporting children, that believes in supporting early childhood educators. We value early childhood educators and the amazing work that they do. I think very fondly of many of the early childhood educators that I had the privilege of engaging with, that my children have the privilege of getting to know and being educated by. And on behalf of our whole team, I think we want to thank them sincerely for their service and know that we've got their back.
Before we continue, I just want to remind all honorable members to refrain from mentioning or referring to the absence or presence of any other honorable member. Thank you. The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, and I thank the minister for letting us know her next conversations are imminent with the federal minister. I would hope it's top of her agenda to urge that minister to get on a plane and get over here to announce some of these childcare centers that are approved, to end the waiting game for these centers who deserve to know whether their projects are approved or not. Secondly, in respect to her comments about the Minister for Education, we hope that he is well enough by then, but we also hope that regardless of which one of them ends up going to the conference in Prince Edward Island, I believe she said, we hope that the renegotiation of these childcare agreements are top of mind on that agenda, considering they are set for a 5-year period from 2021 to 2026. And so negotiations of these agreements take place over many, many months. I was involved in the negotiation of this initial agreement in a previous role in this building. I understand how long it can take, and so I sincerely hope that that is top of mind for them to start lobbying with their provincial colleagues to the federal government. And we look forward to them, whichever one of them goes, reporting back to the Legislative Assembly on the results of that conversation. With respect to the minister's comments regarding the wage grid and recruitment and retention, can she table the numbers or put on the record the number of ECEs that we are short province-wide?
The Honourable Minister.
We know that there is a lot of work to do in supporting the sector and supporting the workers that work in that sector, the very valuable, important workers that work in that sector. I think it's really important to note that this is an issue jurisdictions across Canada are facing, and that Manitoba has a very long-standing commitment to the childcare sector, to growing and supporting and expanding the childcare sector here in Manitoba, and supporting, recruiting, retaining the workers that work in this sector. There is no doubt that there's a shortage. My understanding is that the department estimates that we're currently training about 1,000 childcare workers a year. And we understand and we estimate that to still be insufficient. And that's one of the reasons that our government is committed to working on wages and working conditions for the people that work in this sector so that we can improve recruitment and retention of folks in this sector. I've already outlined some of the great work that our government has done already in our first year, increasing operating grants to childcare facilities by 5% after years of them being stagnant under the previous government, increasing the wages of early childcare educators by 2.75%, the tuition reimbursement, the added spaces in post-secondary. We've also introduced, or expanded, I should say, the annual professional development days for early childhood and childcare professionals. We've doubled it, in fact, and we think that that's really important. And that's one of those working conditions on top of the operational funding that is finally increased. Improving those working conditions should help recruit and retain folks to the sector. As an illustration of Manitoba's long-standing commitment to the childcare sector and childcare workers here in Manitoba, I'd like to remind the committee that in 2010, under a previous NDP government, Manitoba was the second province in the country to finally introduce a childcare pension plan for early childhood educators. As someone who has been a worker, I have been a public servant in my past, and I know the value of a pension and the effect that a pension has on recruitment and retention of a workforce. A pension is a lifeline for so many folks. It's a vision for their future. It's a huge investment, and it's something that attracts folks to different sectors. I remember growing up as a kid, and that was some advice my parents often gave me when we would talk about what the future was going to look like, what profession I might go into. As I mentioned yesterday, both of my parents are career-long public educators who continue to benefit today from their pension plan. And they would often tell me, Tracy, we don't care what you do, but make sure you have a pension. So I'm very proud of the NDP's track record in this regard. It's important to note, and we should all be proud that Manitoba was the second province in Canada to introduce a childcare pension plan. Again, we know that there is a lot more work to do. We are humble enough to admit that. I wish the previous government was humble enough to admit their mistakes, many of those mistakes which put us where we are today.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Well, Honorable Chairperson, what an ending to that comment. It was almost a decent answer until we got to the final sentences. And of course, Progressive Conservatives are very glad to have signed on to the National Childcare Strategy, creating 23,000 new spaces, implementing a wage grid, and also lowering parental daycare fees to $10 a day. We were the first province in the country to reach that threshold, by the way, well before this government took office. And so I'd just like to rewind to a previous answer of the ministers. She mentioned a new child care capital agreement that was signed earlier this year, detailing an additional $20 million, I believe she said. That's on top of the $1.2 billion in the Canada-Manitoba Canada-wide child care agreement, if I am understanding the minister's comments correctly. So in addition to the 23,000 spaces that the $1.2 billion was supposed to create, in addition to the wage grid, et cetera, How many additional spaces does she hope that this $20 million separate deal will build in underserved communities?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you for the question. I'm glad to continue sharing with Manitobans the great success we've had in signing this additional infrastructure funding agreement due to our rosy relationship with the federal government. A relationship that will continue regardless of who sits in the Prime Minister's chair. Because that's what Manitobans elected us to do, was to serve their interests, to work across jurisdiction, to work across party lines, to produce real results for Manitobans. So this funding agreement is a great example of that. It will provide $20.9 million over 3 years to further support the agreement already entered into between Canada and Manitoba. So to answer your question, no, there are no specific space targets associated with this new funding. This new funding is to further support the expansion of projects in both the public and nonprofit space in these underserved communities that require additional supports for a variety of reasons. So we're very proud of this work. This work is going to benefit Manitobans. It's going to benefit the Manitobans that are most in need. I can share with the committee that the specific terms of the action plan under this funding agreement are currently being negotiated and finalized. So the action plan is not at the point where we can discuss it, but we're very excited to share those details when we can. And I know the department is working very hard on finalizing the terms of that agreement so that Manitoba families in some of the most underserved communities in our province will be able to get the additional support that they need. Thank you.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, and I thank the minister for her comments on that. So just to be clear, reiterating the minister's comments, a $20.9 million deal over 3 years on top of the $1.2 billion deal that was signed in 2021. The additional $20.9 million, there are no targets for creating additional spaces, and instead additional supports will be provided to underserved communities. Can the minister give some examples of what those supports might be?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. And I apologize to the committee if I wasn't clear. I thought the name of the agreement made it clear that what these dollars support is infrastructure. This agreement will allocate infrastructure dollars to advance the goal of creating 23,000 new daycare spaces in the province of Manitoba. And why this funding is necessary, is because not all communities are in the same circumstances. There are some communities in our province that require additional infrastructure funding support in order to ensure that they can have those spaces within their communities. So again, much work to be done. We're happy to admit that. Our department is doing the work. Our government is doing the work. We've been left in a situation where the needs of Manitobans were not met under the previous government. That's clear. We all saw that play out in the last election, and we saw it play out on October 3rd. Manitobans felt neglected by the previous government. Manitobans were looking for a government that would advance their interests, that understands the needs of average Manitoban families, working families, families that struggle to find and afford childcare, of which there are many. We've made a lot of good progress since being elected in October. We're continuing to make progress, and we're just getting started. And we'll continue that great work with the support of this infrastructure funding agreement. Thank you.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and the minister is reminding us at the end of every answer that she has a job to do. I appreciate that. She probably doesn't have to reiterate it every time, but I guess that's her purview to do so. So just to be clear, $20.9 million over 3 years, no additional spaces on top of the 23,000. So what the minister is putting on the record is that $1.2 billion was not enough money, in addition to the other things that it was supposed to do, wage grid, $10 a day, supplementing parent fees. $1.2 billion was not enough to build the 23,000 spaces. And so their government has negotiated an additional, let's call it 21 million, to support that work, to reach the goal by 2026 of opening 23,000 new spaces in the province. Is the minister confident that that additional 21 million will be enough to get her government to the 23,000 new spaces, or will she be going back to Ottawa to ask for further funds?
The Honourable Minister.
It is a strange line of questioning to criticize our government's success in obtaining tens of millions of dollars of funding, additional funding that their government didn't secure. We were able to get it done. I suppose maybe the member's question was, why didn't we reject $20.9 million? The question insinuated that there was already an agreement signed. Why would you need 20 million more dollars? I suspect that the member opposite and his colleagues don't understand the needs of underserved communities. I don't think that their record shows that they served those underserved communities. I'm very proud of this infrastructure funding agreement. And if the federal government, to answer your question, comes to the table and wants to partner in expanding this agreement and giving Manitoba more funds for Manitobans and their kids and their families, we'll be at the table every single time. And that's what Manitobans are looking for. And that's what Manitobans did on October 3rd. They rejected the nonsensical positions of the previous government. And they elected a common sense government that is going to work with the federal government to get every dollar into Manitoba that we can and make sure that those dollars go to the people that need them most. That's what this nearly $21 million will do. Again, it's a strange line of questioning. $21 million, you know what it'll do? It'll do more. It'll do more. Yeah. I know that's a strange concept. Perhaps it sounds like it's confusing to the members opposite. Seems pretty straightforward to me. We got more money. We're going to do more with it for the people who have the most need. That's good governance. The members opposite should listen. I'm really scratching my head at this question. I can't imagine that we would criticize the ability to negotiate a further funding agreement. But that's what Manitobans got for 7.5 years. Manitobans, there were millions, I would say maybe even billions of dollars left on the table thanks to the reckless governance of Brian Pallister and Heather Stephenson after him. Reckless. Left millions of dollars on the table again and again and again, whether we're talking about childcare or whatever we're talking about. They had an inability to play nice in the sandbox. They continue to have that same approach in the legislature today. And I'm very proud of the work that our team and our department is doing to move forward, to secure additional funding, to use those dollars in the most responsible way possible, and to make sure that the Manitobans that need those dollars most are the ones that benefit from them. Thank you.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Well, the only thing that's disappointing about this situation, Honourable Chair, is the fact that the minister's been asked a very simple question and all she has is political tax as a way of an answer. I'm not criticizing the fact that she got the $21 million. I'm just asking her where she's going to spend it. And she's either so badly briefed on her file or hasn't done the homework herself to give us and all Manitobans a straight answer on where she's expending those funds. So if that's a confusing question to her, that we're in committee of supply asking questions on her budget and where her department is spending her money, then I'm not sure she really knows why we're here. But that's the purpose, to give Manitobans the details on where this government is spending the money that it allocated in its budget in this fiscal year, and the agreements that it signed with other governmental partners. And so if she can't answer those questions, then she should probably ask for a recess, go get better briefed on where this $21 million is going, and then we can start this process back again. So if the minister wants to come forward with a straight answer about where and what that $21 million would be spent on, I think all Manitobans would appreciate it. I'm not criticizing her for having gone and got it, or if it was the previous minister. Good for them. But Manitobans deserve to know where it's being spent. Will she share that with Manitobans today?
The Honourable Minister.
I accept the congratulation from the members opposite on securing this additional funding and signing this agreement. It is a huge success, and I'm glad to hear that we agree. I would urge the member to perhaps listen when I'm answering the question. Because not in my last answer, but in the answer prior, I clearly stated, and you can pull up the Hansard and bring it here tomorrow, but the Hansard will reflect that I shared with the committee that the action plan under this new infrastructure funding agreement is currently being negotiated and finalized by the department. And that until those details are finalized, we can't discuss the details of our action plan. There is an action plan, and I can't wait to receive your congratulations on it when we release it. It's a great thing. What I can share is that the action plan will be targeted, will be thoughtful, and will be designed to have the greatest impact, serving communities that are traditionally underserved and that need extra help. And on the topic of help, I would just like to frankly shame the member opposite for his suggestion that I was not properly briefed. The Department of Education and Early Childhood Learning has some of the most fantastic folks that work incredibly hard and in incredibly challenging circumstances that we find ourselves in, at no one's fault. This is life. Life happens. We're all human beings. The minister responsible, sorry, I need to think about what I'm going to say because of the words that the chairperson has already, the warnings the chairperson has already given me. Due to these human circumstances that we're dealing with, our team has pulled together. We've come up with a plan to be able to keep things rolling in the Department of Education and Early Childhood Learning. And we're doing that to great success. And that is not because of me as the acting minister. That is because of the fantastic work of the folks you see sitting at this table beside me here today, and of, how big is the department? Hundreds of other public servants that work in the department. The materials they have been able to provide me, the guidance that they have been sharing with me is second to none. And I feel it's very important to put on the record how embarrassed I am by your comment, insinuating that I was not properly briefed. Second to none. is the job that these folks are doing under incredibly challenging circumstances. And I want to lift them up and commend them and thank them so much for the support that they are giving to me and to our government as we work to clean up the absolute mess that Manitobans were left with after 7.5 years of a government who didn't take meetings with stakeholders, didn't take meeting with their own department officials. I am so grateful for the briefings that I've received. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in this department yet. I probably never will be. That's not my job. These folks are the experts. I'm here to answer to Manitobans. I'm here to work in the public interest on behalf of Manitobans, and I would encourage the opposition to think about Manitobans and the people they represent and the public servants who do the work on behalf of Manitobans, and to respect them.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Well, thank you, Honorable Chair, and I'm equally as embarrassed at the minister's answer, I guess, as she is at my question. Me questioning whether she has been well briefed on her new file or not is not a reflection of the hardworking civil servants, but rather her ability or interest in actually reading and learning the briefing materials that they are providing to her, which I have no doubt are prepared in an exemplary and professional manner. The minister has said that this new action plan for the additional $21 million is still under negotiation. The news release was issued for this agreement on May 14th, so that's 5 months ago, to negotiate, I guess, and write the details down of the action plan. Can the minister share with Manitobans how many more months she believes the action plan is going to take?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Thank you to the member for the question. We're working hard to get it done. The department is working to the best of their ability to get it done. Obviously, a negotiation is a two-way, at least, street. So it's not entirely within our control. But rest assured that the agreement will be signed as soon as is reasonably possible. There's a lot of work going on in the department. As I mentioned, we've been left in quite a mess. This is one piece of the work that we're doing to right the ship. There's a lot more work being done. Not to suggest that this isn't a priority, because it absolutely is. We'll continue to work with the federal government on finalizing this agreement and any other agreements that they're willing to come to the table to discuss. Thank you.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you. And for the record, another non-answer from this minister regarding timelines. I'm sure, hoping that the federal government will start imposing some timelines, because they are looking forward to getting these childcare spaces and this childcare funding rolled out, because it does not seem to be a priority for this minister or the Premier's government. Can the minister answer whether they will be proceeding with the RTM model for childcare centers that was acclaimed across the country when implemented by the previous government?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, and thank you to the member for Spruce Woods for the question. It delights me to take the opportunity to applaud the work of our Assistant Deputy Minister on this model. I understand that it is an award-winning model developed by her department or her branch. It's been implemented to great success. And the simple answer is yes.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, and wow, that was a shocking revelation today. Good to hear that the minister can admit when one thing was done right under the previous administration, and we thank the departmental team for getting that project off the ground. I think all Manitobans will be relieved to hear that the RTM model is proceeding. It was effective and got the job done. With the passage of Bill 18 in the spring sitting, can the minister outline if money has flowed to post-secondaries for the childcare learning labs? And if so, how much funding has flowed to post-secondaries?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, and thank you to the member opposite for the question which gives me an opportunity to talk about Bill 18, which was an excellent piece of legislation, something that was overdue. The member opposite knows that this was a piece of enabling legislation. So that's all the legislation really did, was enable the partnership to exist between the department and public bodies. So we are deeply committed to working towards those partnerships. I can advise the committee that the department is, so after the enabling legislation was passed in the spring, the department has been hard at work finalizing and implementing these arrangements that will produce these partnerships and will support the public sector in expanding access to early childhood education. I'm very proud of the work of our government in expanding its early learning and childhood care capital program through engagement and partnerships, not only with post-secondary institutions, but also with municipalities and Indigenous governing bodies and other public sector organizations, while continuing its existing partnerships with school divisions and community-based nonprofit organizations. Bill 18 allows us to pursue further support of the public sector. And again, I mentioned earlier about the fact that I've experienced the shortcomings in the child care sector during the last 7.5 years under the PC government. It was not so long ago that I was a student at the University of Manitoba with a newborn child. And there was a childcare program there at the time at the University of Manitoba, but they were very limited. I spent my entire 4-year degree there on the wait list. So never got access to the childcare that I needed on site. So Bill 18 is a really important piece of legislation for students. It will support students, it will support workers. We are thrilled at its passage, and we look forward to finalizing and implementing those projects. Thank you.
The member for Turtle Mountain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to have the opportunity to put some words on this estimates process. I had the opportunity to meet with council of the town of Balder, Manitoba, and they were so grateful that we actually were able to get them a 74-unit children's daycare, which also include nursery school and age group up to 74 students or children for the daycare for different age groups. And then when we were under the construction last summer, it's about to be completed. But the concern that they have now, and they were been waiting for 9 months to know that they've been told that they may only get coverage up to 40 students. So now this facility is almost twice the size, and they're not able to get the full 74 students or children daycare, the grant money to continue the operations of the daycare. And so they've been asking this department, they've been writing letters, they're not hearing anything from this department. So this is why I came up with this question today, was to see why no one's getting back to them to talk about the opportunity of the need that Balder has, the region has. I know I have a ex-employee who actually now works at the insurance agency in Balder, and she has to travel many miles or kilometers to the next towns to get her twins to 2 different daycares. Balder would be so grateful if Balder would have got that daycare to have 74 spaces, and now they've been reduced to 40, and now they've been budgeted, they've been planning for the full 74 spaces, and they're very disappointed, but they're not hearing anything from the department.
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you to the member for Turtle Mountain for the question. I know that access to childcare is an issue that affects your constituents, affects my constituents. I relate wholeheartedly to your constituent that you were speaking to that has 2 kids in 2 different daycares. My sister has had that experience. I have had that experience. I know many Manitobans are suffering with that experience. So I appreciate your advocacy and bringing forward the concerns of your community. I am getting a little bit of different information for the department, so I would encourage us on this issue. We can continue to talk about it here in Committee of Supply, absolutely. I would also welcome a discussion offline here today so that we can make sure that we're speaking the same language here. The department that the information that I'm getting from the department is that department officials were actually in Balder at this daycare just this week. That work is well underway to get the final licensing condition approvals. That as far as from the information that we have here today, that the center is on track to open on time, and that the operational funding, and that's why I'm a bit confused about your question when you say the 74 spaces and then there's 40. So I'm not sure if you're talking about operational funding, but my understanding is that the operational funding will flow for every space that is filled. So I'm not sure if there are additional challenges in the community to filling the spaces, and perhaps that's the issue. Again, we've talked at length already here today about the fact that there are recruitment and retention issues in the early childhood education sector that we are working hard on improving. I've talked about it at length already today about the wage increases, the tuition reimbursement program, the additional post-secondary programs that are established, the increased operational funding. So my understanding is that things are on track in Balder, but I'm happy to hear your feedback and have this discussion further. And again, happy to have that here today. Happy to have it at another time. Happy to follow up with the department. And we're happy to dialogue with you, honorable member, and with the community. We're here to work with all communities to try to make sure that their childcare needs are met, and that they have the adequate space and the adequate staffing and the adequate operational funding to serve the community. So.
The member for Turtle Mountain.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the minister for getting a follow-up from the department. I got an email just on Friday that's the concern that they had. I was there probably over a month ago. Let's say the capital cost of the facility, they were totally funded for that. It's the operation grant that they're concerned about, because it was supposed to, again, how do they operate when you actually have capacity for 75 students, your budget for 75 students, and then you're only going to get grant funding for 40 students. That's a big impact, and there's a need in the community. Yeah, there might be concern, but again, they've been on hold for even hiring workers because they weren't reassured that this operating grant would cover the additional staff, and that was the biggest concern that they had. And so, just to clarify, if you can come back with an answer, that'd be great. If there was a meeting with Boulder, that's good to know. I'm hoping that this was clarified, that because this is not just the one community. There's other communities out there that actually they were talking to that are in the same situation as they were. But I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, because he has the same question with one of his facilities.
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you to the member from Turtle Mountain. Yeah, we're happy to continue this dialogue and make sure that we're on the same page. Thank you.
The member for Dawson Trail.
Yes. So as my colleague was mentioning, and I did ask this question in question period, I have a daycare in Landmark called the Legacy, not Legacy, but Legacy Daycare Center. and they are facing similar challenges. They've got the space, but they can't seem to get the funding to hire more people, or they're having a challenge hiring more people. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of immediate solution we could offer them, because there's definitely space there, and they're even able, they did all this pretty much privately funded. They're even able to add on and put more space on that daycare if the opportunity became available to them.
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you to the member for Dawson Trail for bringing up this question again. I know it was mentioned in question period. And like I've said to the other members, I do really want to sincerely thank you for your advocacy for your community. That's important work, and I'm glad that you've been able to connect with the folks at Legacy Daycare and advance their queries. My understanding from the department is that just this week we did receive contact, so I don't believe that dialogue has been initiated yet. And I hope that you would understand that there are over 12,000?
1,200.
1,200. 1,200. There are over 1,200. My apologies. Yeah, it'd be great if there were
We're
1,200.
working towards it. Yeah, yeah. 2 kids a center.
Currently, there are over 1,200 facilities in the province, so we don't always have these situations at the top of our minds or at our fingertips. But we were able to locate some correspondence from the daycare sharing their concerns. And so we're happy to follow up with you again, either here at committee or offline, and we can make sure that we're on the same page. I think it is important for the committee to note that the way in which daycares and these types of facilities are funded is by occupied spaces, not necessarily available spaces. And so it's not necessarily, in my understanding, uncommon for these types of facilities to open in phases. So it's not necessarily uncommon for a 75 space facility to perhaps only have 40 occupied spaces in those early phases of their operation. I'm not sure if this analogy is correct. You guys can kick me under the table, but I'm thinking, like, I think there's a bit of a chicken and egg challenge. You need the spaces to be occupied to get the funding. You need staff to be able to fill those spaces. So I don't think it's so uncommon that these phased-in approaches occur. But certainly we want to make sure that the facility that you're referencing in Landmark has the resources that they require to make sure that we can take advantage of that space. Happy to work together with you going forward. And again, and I'm sure the department will follow up in due course. Thank you.
The member for Dawson Trail.
So I'd like to thank the minister for the answer and the department as well. I just would request that perhaps when you do meet with them that you can let me know, like I would gladly come down, and this isn't a partisan issue. This is a matter of trying to meet the needs in that particular community. And I know there's quite a large need in the community of Landmark as it's growing. I'm gonna kind of go over to St. Anne here. And it's not a jab, this is again, working in collaboration, trying to ensure that the needs are being met in these communities, as St. Anne is the fastest growing community in the Southeast right now. I have over 3,000 people in that community. And with the school that was supposed to be coming under the P3 model, we lost, I think it was about 75 daycare spaces. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that would have actually have met the needs of the community. We would have hit where we were at the time when that was announced, would have met all the needs of daycare in that community. I'm sure it's greater now because the community is growing quite fast. I'm just looking to see if we can maybe get a timeline as to if those needs are going to be met or if they're going to be kind of like, I'm just looking for clarity on that particular matter.
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you to the member for Dawson Trail again for the question and for his advocacy for his community and for his willingness to work in a nonpartisan way, which I'm always happy to do whenever possible. I'm I'm happy to share with the committee that is my understanding that construction is almost complete on a new childcare facility in the town of St. Anne. 74 spaces is what my understanding is what that facility will have. I can't give an exact timeline, unfortunately, for when that will be fully operational. But I'm glad to hear that there is a construction project nearly complete, and that will hopefully alleviate some of the need that's happening in this growing community.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Chairperson, and I thank the Minister for her responses to my colleagues' constituency questions. I would be remiss if I didn't ask a few of my own related to my community, as we're in the waning hours of the estimates process here, Committee of Supply. And the Deputy Minister and the Assistant Deputy Minister will be familiar with two of these because I wrote to the Minister regarding the Wawanesa We Care facility on April 29th, and I wrote about the Rivers Early Learning Center either in March or May. I'm not sure which order they were in. Both towns, as well as Souris, the third community, have one facility each that are completely full and have between 80 and 100 kids on each wait list. I've met with all of the facilities. I have another meeting with Souris Early Learning Cooperative Daycare on Tuesday, and all three facilities have applied under the Early Learning Childcare Agreement for capital funding to build secondary facilities to meet these needs in their communities. Can the Minister update Manitobans and these facilities on where those applications are at, or are they tied up in waiting for the federal government to announce, as she referenced earlier? Thank you.
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you to the member opposite, the member for Spruce Woods, for the question, and I also thank him for his advocacy for his community. It's great to see that folks in the community have a elected representative that's bringing their issues forward to committee. I can confirm that for the Souris facility, the answer simply is yes. There were 104 spaces announced. The other two facilities we are still following up on. This is not in trying to be non-transparent, but just in the interest of time. I know we're trying to get out of here. So I guess what I'll say is for the remaining two facilities, we'll have to just take that under advisement for the moment. We will follow up with you. And again, our staff are working diligently here trying to get those answers. If we can get them to you before the end of the day, we'll get them to you before the end of the day.
The Honorable Member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Chair, and I thank the minister for that. That's very good news about the 104 additional spaces for Souris. I'm not sure that they're aware of that, because I get asked from members of the board that if the secondary facility which had land provided by the school division is proceeding, I get asked that questions from board members. So I have a meeting on Tuesday night with them. If I can confirm that to them, that would be very helpful, but we can take that offline. I have one last question that I want to get actually on the record today. I wrote to the Minister of Education on September 9th regarding the Souris School senior year science lab renovation, and I have not received an answer from the minister. Obviously, there's been a lot of things going on, so not a criticism or a partisan shot, but I did write that letter. Very curious to know if the pause on the Souris School science lab renovation was sort of just a accidental pause, or if that's intentional, and when we may be able to get that project back on the books, because I can attest that I was in that science lab over a decade ago and it needed help then, so it does need some TLC. Thank you.
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you for the member to the member for the question. Yeah, there are certainly multiple pressures on our department. We've been discussing them over the last 2 days. The department has a finite amount of resources and is working very hard to strike and find the right balance between upgrading existing infrastructure, recognizing that there's a need, but also weighing that against the pressure and the need for new capital projects. So the Surrey School Senior Year Science Lab is a project that has been deferred from this budget cycle. My understanding is that the division is aware, and that we will defer that project into the upcoming estimates process and budget cycle. So, you know, I wish we could fund every project across the province. That's my sincere wish and desire. I know it's your wish and desire as well. But the reality is that there are a finite amount of resources. We are working diligently as a government to chart a path towards balance after being left a historic deficit. And so this project is deferred. Happy to consider it going forward in next year's budget process. And again, I thank you for your advocacy for your community.
Hearing no further questions, we will now proceed to consideration of the resolutions relevant to this department. I will now call Resolution 16.2. Resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $34,528,000 for education and early childhood learning, student achievement and inclusion for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 16.3, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $13,470,000 for education and early childhood learning, Bureau de l'Éducation française, for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025. Shall the resolution pass?
Yes.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 16.4, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $13,429,000 for education and early childhood learning, system performance and accountability for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 16.5, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $1,866,290,000 for education and early childhood learning, support to schools for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 16.5, resolved that there be 16.6. Sorry, my slight correction, resolution 16.6. Resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $6,606,000 for education and early childhood learning, corporate services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 16.7, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $459,506,000 for education and early childhood learning, early learning and childcare for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 16.8, resolved there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $109,301,000 for education and early childhood learning, costs related to capital assets of other reporting entities' capital investment for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 16.9, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $160 million for education and early childhood learning, other reporting entities, capital investment for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed. The last item to be considered for the estimates of this department is item 16.1A, the minister's salaries contained in resolution 16.1. At this point, we request that the minister's staff leave the table for the consideration of this last item. Yes.
As soon as they're gone. Thank you, folks. So once they leave the end of the table, they're considered away.
This and this.
Yeah, the floor is open for questions. And then you read the resolution like you were before.
This resolution?
Yeah, this one here.
Okay. The floor is open for questions.
Any questions?
Seeing no questions, resolution 16.1, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $2,739,000 for education and early childhood learning, administration, and finance for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025. Shall the resolution pass? The resolution is accordingly passed.
The hour being for, the next department being housing, do you want me to write it down for you?
Yes, please. The next department to be considered is Housing, Addictions, and Homelessness, the hour being 4:57. What is the will of the committee? Committee is adjourned.
Remember, I need your autograph, so you can't
Yes.
leave those.